ABC, always be closing. And that's what webinar presentations are all about. If you're performing a webinar, it is all about closing the sale. A webinar presentation is the equivalent of a modern day sales pitch. And I have performed hundreds of times in my life. My webinar has been seen by millions of people, and I've tested everything about them. And I'm gonna walk you through the perfect webinar formula in this presentation. Now, I have 8 different sections to this webinar. This is a simplified version. I'll be explaining as much as I can. Abbreviated TOIC. Now, the goal of a webinar is generally to get somebody to take an action, to buy a product or a service, or to call a phone number, whatever it is you're doing, whether you're selling B2B or whether you're selling B2C, webinars work and they're fantastic, and they are really the only way to be selling anything on the internet if you ask me. So the first thing you need in an effective webinar is you want a catchy, descriptive title. Some suggestions here. It should be about whatever product you're selling. If you're selling a marker, for instance, you have to, you want to say how to effectively use a man marker in 5 simple tricks that help your presentations. Whatever that is, you want to have a number typically. 2 big rules of thumb are if you can give people a time constraint, if you can say, I will show you 5 techniques to getting 2 dates in the next 30 days. But you want to give people what their result is. What is the result that people are trying to achieve? And give them some sort of time constraint. I like telling people, how fast they can do something, because people don't, yes, you might be able to get on 2 dates, but if it takes you 2 years, then that's not really a good use of time. So a catchy descriptive title that is talking about the subject that you are, or the product that you are selling. Next step is you need an outline, okay? So after you talk about the title, you wanna give people, your audience, an outline of what you'll be talking about. And this can also be called future pacing. You wanna give people an idea of what's to come. If you don't give people an idea of what is to come, people can just stand there sitting and staring at you, and they'll be bored out of their skulls. If people are bored out of their skulls, if people don't know what to expect, then you're not gonna keep their attention. However, if you tell people, here's what you're gonna learn in this presentation, I'm gonna show you 5 secrets to performing webinars that will dramatically increase your sales. I'm gonna show you how to automate your webinars. You only have to perform it once and millions of people can see it. So it doesn't take any extra of your time. At the end of the presentation, I'm going to give you a template for the perfect webinar formula that you can print out and fill in the blanks for your own product. Now you've got somebody's attention, and now they're waiting to see what's coming next and next and next. So that's a good outline. You want to keep people engaged for everything that is to come, because maybe somebody's interested in getting that template for the perfect webinar formula, but they're not interested in the little training bits in between. So that way you keep them to the end. Next is you want to give an introduction. And this is an introduction to yourself or to your company if you're working for a company. Now, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is John Crestani. I was a medical guinea pig that was desperately trying to make money online. And I've gone on to make millions of dollars online. Okay, I make millions of dollars every year. Right now, last year my business did almost $4 million in revenues. I live in Malibu, California, and I have thousands upon thousands of other success stories of people who have gone through my training and gone on to make thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even some people making millions of dollars just by watching my training. So you give people your story or your company's story in your introduction. What you should also be doing kind of in your story, what you also want to do, you want to overcome people's objections. Whatever you're selling, whether it's insurance or mortgages or sweaters or camera equipment or agency services, whatever you're selling, there are reasons why people don't buy. So you want to bring those up in your story. So what I could have done in my introduction is I could have brought up those objections within a story format. I could have said, I've made millions of dollars on the internet without any technical skills. I don't know how to program. If you ask me to write a line of code, I will break the internet. I will say without having an audience. I made all this money without even a social media presence. I could say without having an email list, without having employees. So you want to tell people what they can do things without. And it's best if you do that within your story. I said, I made millions of dollars on the internet without any outside investment, because these might be objections people bring up in their mind when you get later on in your sales pitch. Bring up their objections early on and bring them up in a story format. That's, I always see, the best way. Next is you want to actually deliver whatever your training is. Now, your training, this is generally a whole section right here, takes up about, let's say 5 to 15 minutes. Now, the training itself should be maybe about 30 minutes long. 30 to 45 minutes is a good barometer here. You want to, generally your training should be on one of two things. You should be either giving people tips or tricks or techniques or tactics to do something. 5 different tactics to create the perfect lighting for your YouTube video set. Or you could do mistakes, tips or mistakes. One is framed positively, one is framed negatively. Mistakes are generally much more powerful than tips. You could say 5 common mistakes parents make in raising their children that cause them to have issues later on in life. People are much more attracted, for biological reasons I won't go into in this video, to mistakes, to the negative. People are much more attracted to the story where somebody, where there was a, mass gun shooting at a school versus somebody who donated schools to a community in Africa. One will make headlines, one might be page 3. And the training should be the bulk of, it should be the content that you deliver. Generally speaking, it is the reason why people are attending your presentation in the first place. Make sure to give some serious value here, and it should be interesting. Another technique is, if you're more advanced, within the training, you can talk about some case studies of people who used your product, which you'll eventually get to, or service successfully, or you could overcome objections within your training. Again, what are the reasons why people won't buy your insurance or won't, contract with your ad agency? Might be they're worried about it's too expensive, or is your company HIPAA compliant, all that stuff. And you could bring that up in your training. You could say one mistake companies make is they don't work with an ad agency that is HIPAA compliant. I'm making up stuff here, but maybe you get the idea of what I'm talking about. After you deliver the training, this is where it starts to turn, and this is called the transition, to where you're going to start talking about your product. Now, the transition may be 1 to 2 minutes long. The transition isn't very long. The transition is extremely short, actually. But it's very important. It's a very pivotal part of your webinar presentation, because going from training to what we'll get to, which is the actual product or service that you're selling, moving from just helping somebody out to selling them something, there can be some inertia there. And you want to remove as much inertia as possible, so you're not just saying, hey, here's some tips. By the way, you want to buy my product or service? Right? That doesn't seem congruent. By the way, I have a product or service I'd like to sell you. So what you want to do in the transition is, generally speaking, the heaven or hell scenario is the most common that people use, and that's the one we'll talk about here. So the transition most commonly used by people is saying, okay, great, I just trained you. I hope you learned a lot about how to light your YouTube set. If you learned a lot from those mistakes and you got a lot of information, you're gonna go out and be successful. Now, you're at a point where you could go do it alone. Go out, do it alone, have no support, have nobody to turn to, and try to put all this stuff into action. Maybe you'll do it, maybe you won't. Or you could work with an expert. You could work with a YouTube agency or whatever it's called. You can work with a videographer, a set designer that is an expert, and you can have me do it all for you. That's a good transition. Now, the next step, after you paint that transition, you say, so you could go it alone or you could work with an expert. Let me explain to you what it means to work with an expert. And you go into your offer. This is where you describe whatever product or service that you're offering, okay? Whether you're selling insurance or interior designing, you could say, look, when you're working with this interior designer, when you're working with me and my interior design agency, you say, I am going to, assist with the construction of your house to make sure that the paint and all of this stuff, your walls, you don't have any problems with the contractors. You list all of the benefits. I'm gonna share with you my Pinterest boards that have the best, examples of design you can get done cheaply, so your house can look like a $10 million house on a $1 million budget. Whatever it is you're offering, you go into that offer. You list all the reasons why you are the best and how it helps people. So let's say that's 5 to 10 minutes. And then you get into C. A, B, C, always be closing. And this is where you are closing the deal. You explain to people, put down a deposit to speak with me, and we can do a 1-hour consultation for $200. Or you could say, here, you can schedule an appointment to talk to me. Or you could say, here, here's how you buy my product. Whatever it is you're selling, this is the point where you close. Now, if you did this all correctly, you actually overcame every question that they would be asking at this point in your presentation itself. Any question that they'd be asking, like, can I talk to you afterwards? Or, how long do we work together? You should have overcame every one of those objections within your training, your introduction or your training itself. Every question that somebody should have had should have already come up, and you should have already addressed it multiple times so that they don't have those questions when they're here, when you're asking them to do what you want them to do. What most people do is they still have a Q&A at the end. So any additional questions, any additional objections that people have, you overcome those in the question and answer session at the end of your training. Now, that's all said and done. Let's say you're closing people. Say this is 5 to 10 minutes. Say this is 5 to 10 minutes. You're in for anywhere for about maybe an hour to an hour and a half, okay, is a typical webinar training presentation. Shorter than a movie, but that's a typical sales presentation in person. That's a typical sales presentation time length for sales presentation over the phone too.